Maggie there?
Yes, I am. Oh, you want to say hello there?
I will say that last week it took me about 10 minutes to realize that it's the picture of you in the car with the dog is an avatar and wasn't actually you in the car with your dog. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks again for taking some time out of your morning to be with us and for what I know will be a really wonderful conversation with a wonderful guy, my friend Mark Loranger. Mark, who we were just talking, says given this whole crisis, he's got a little more time in him before he retires. But runs just a marvelous organization that some of us might be familiar with. I know Don Levy, our director of communications, who's on the call, is familiar with because he was instrumental actually in setting up a program that the Temple did with Chrysalis long before my time or Mark's, I think. And just an amazing organization that devotes so much of its effort and energy and resources to helping folks, navigate a path back toward the workforce. And has a whole other side of the business, which hopefully Mark will touch on, where they actually have their own workforce for folks who are unable for many to enter kind of mainstream immediately. So Mark, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. It's good to be here.
Great to see you. I commented when you first got on that you were very fancy with your well-branded background here.
Well, my communication team has to be doing something right now. So creating professional Zoom backgrounds has become one of their specialties.
I was going to say. So Mark, maybe let's start this. So tell us, just for those who don't know, a little bit more about Chrysalis and kind of what you guys do. I know, if I'm not mistaken, you guys are now in 3 different kind of main locations.
Sure. So Chrysalis is a nonprofit that's been around for 35 years now. And our mission is to work with the homeless and folks that have been disconnected from the workforce and help them get back on the path to self-sufficiency by finding and, most importantly, retaining employment. Our clients typically are individuals that have experienced homelessness, that are returning citizens from the prison system, or they've faced other significant barriers to employment, such that if they were to walk into a traditional workforce center or unemployment office, they won't be well served by that system because they don't have a fresh resume. Their skills may be out of sync with what the market needs today. They may not have a resume at all. They may never have worked in a traditional job, and yet they are ready, willing, and able to get back to work. They just are having a hard time doing it. Our philosophy is that a job is the key to helping somebody get out of poverty for the long term, as opposed to a Band-Aid approach. And as we all know, a job means the paycheck and it means paying our bills and our way in society, but it's so much more than that, right? It's about dignity. It's about self-respect. It's about being able to connect with your community and with your family. So it's kind of our philosophy. We now actually have 5 offices. We have our largest one in the Skid Row area of downtown. We have one in Santa Monica, one in Pacoima in the San Fernando Valley. About 18 months ago, we opened an office in Anaheim, our first office outside of Los Angeles County. And then we opened an office about a year ago in South LA that's a partnership with the Department of Probation and some other service providers. So every day before this crisis, we saw between 400 to 500 clients a day at each of those centers. And the clients are coming in to take one of our classes or workshops. Or
400 to 500 a day at each site?
No, I'm sorry, across the sites, across all of them. Wow. Yeah.
About 100 a day. So that's still, I mean, that in and of itself is a huge number.
Yeah. So they're coming in to meet with their case manager, take classes, what have you. And, typically the conversations that are going on in our offices, although we measure ourselves by job outcomes, that's how we hold ourselves accountable, and job retention. The reality is that the bulk of the conversations with our clients begin with things that have nothing to do with employment. It's about housing. It's about health. It's about childcare. It's about financial instability. It's about background issues that they're struggling with. It's all of this stuff that has to be addressed before somebody can successfully not just do a job search, because basically anybody can apply for a job and maybe they can even get it for a day or two. But if they don't keep it, then what have we done? Not only have we wasted our effort, but most importantly, that client is going to be disappointed and frustrated, and maybe they're not going to repeat the process. So we have to take care of all of that whole person care, that groundwork, as we call it, before somebody can really begin and execute a job search. For about 60% of the clients that we see, their background, their resume is such that they are not going to have a lot of success going down to your local warehouse or grocery store or security company getting a job. And so we hire them into one of our 3 businesses. We have 3 transitional jobs programs that provide temporary employment for our clients that's designed to get them back up on their feet in terms of what a job is, provide them with wages, minimum wage or above, but most importantly, just what it's like to show up every day, to go to work, wear a uniform, respond to supervision, work on a team, make some mistakes, and be coached around that. Those businesses are actually a $20 million business unit for us combined. They're profitable. We don't call it profit, we call it margin. And then the margin that those businesses generate then helps reduce the other $10 million of our budget that we otherwise would have to raise philanthropically. During a pre-COVID period, every week we had about 600 people that were working in those businesses. Real jobs, real experience, up to a year working for us, and then transitioning to outside employment. And last year, our ultimate success goal and metric is the outside employment number. We had 2,554 clients that secured outside employment last year. And of those, we know that 70% of them are still working 6 to 12 months later. When you consider that the recidivism rate in California is about 70%, we're kind of flipping that on its head. And while we would love to have that number be 80% or 90%, we're pretty happy with that 70%. So I'll pause there for a minute. That's just kind of the nutshell or what we do.
So the enterprise side, was that present from the inception? Has that been there for 35 years, or did that evolve?
It evolved, and we've been doing the businesses for about 25 years at this point, and it started with just filling a need in the community in our downtown area. This is at the time when business improvement districts were just being created. Here in LA, we have, I think there are 36 business improvement districts that are collections of property owners that pay into a fund to do security and maintenance services in their neighborhoods because they're not satisfied with what the city or the county does for them. So we do maintenance services to business improvement districts. Just a particular niche that we're really good at. That's one of our 3 businesses. And that in and of itself, I think is revenue in that business is about $10 million. Wow. So there's a lot of money in trash. Not like The Sopranos, not that kind of trash. We do.
And the other, you said there's 3, the other 2?
Yeah, we have a temporary staffing business that, as the name implies, it's a staffing agency, and our niche there is providing resources to housing providers, affordable housing providers, to do janitorial work, housekeeping, maintenance work. And then our 3rd business is a partnership with Caltrans and the city of LA, and we're providing crew-based labor on Caltrans right-of-ways, sometimes on the freeway main line, but usually on Caltrans properties throughout the county.
And just to be clear, so in essence, those operate as sort of a social entrepreneurship that then helps feed the bottom line for the social service kind of side of the business.
Exactly. It's a business that is self-supporting in the sense that the contracts pay for the men and women that are working in the businesses, the supervisors, the fleet of 60 vehicles we have, and all that good stuff. And there's a little money left over, which then helps to defray the programmatic costs of running what we do. I'll say that, but also there is always, in any organization that runs social enterprises, particularly if it's a jobs-based social enterprise, there is tension between the program side of the house and the business side of the house. Because my social enterprise managers have obligations to their customers, just like many of you do in your businesses. We got to be out there at 6 a.m. cleaning streets, pressure washing, removing graffiti. And if we don't do a good job of it, we're going to get fired, and they'll find somebody else to do that contract. which means that some of the men and women that we have, perhaps they wouldn't be the first choice of a commercial operator to hire. So there are going to be things that happen, and we have to deal with those things in a business-like manner, but also in a programmatic, big-hearted manner, because that's why we exist. And this tension between the two halves of our organization, if you will, is a healthy tension, in my opinion. But a lot of people, when they first come to Chrysalis, are kind of shocked by that you can do both and do it well. It doesn't happen by itself. It happens with a lot of thought and a lot of smart people doing it and navigating that tension and being very transparent about it every day.
I imagine it's the tension, even just thinking about the enterprise side, it's the tension between, right, not just being a for-profit business that wants to have that thinks about the bottom line. There's also a social service mission to the business that, to your point, is sometimes at odds, because you're going to hire people or keep people on that, in the private sector wouldn't be there.
That's right. We did a time and motion study a few years ago, and we calculated that between 15 to 20% of the time that our supervisors are on the job is completely unproductive commercial work time. Meaning that if we were a commercial cleaning contractor, that 15 to 20% of their time would be done doing commercial things. Instead, they're essentially doing case management work in a work setting in the field. And all of our supervisors, we have 38 of them, all of them have come up through our program. So they've all been clients. They were all street sweepers or graffiti removal folks. And we recognized their leadership potential, developed them, and now they're on permanent staff, just like me. And they are leading these teams. So they can coach and develop the men and women that we have in the field at a level that most of us never could, because we don't have that lived experience.
So, now we find ourselves 7, almost 8 weeks into this pandemic, into this coronavirus reality. And so how has this virus and all that we're living with in quarantine and social distancing, all of this impacted, your service to clients on the purely service side, but also, just based on what we've been saying, I imagine also impacting the enterprises significantly as well?
Yeah, it's been quite a shock, like it has been for all of us. We made the decision on March 12th, which was a Thursday, to close to in-office services to clients beginning Monday, March 16th. And at the time, we thought that would be for a few days until we could kind of figure out the social distancing thing and all that. And then by Monday, the 16th, we realized, no, this is, let's do it for 2 weeks. And then it's, now become completely open-ended. So we did what everybody had to do. But my team has been so creative with figuring out how we can continue to stay relevant to the community that we serve. That, for example, all of our case managers and the team that supports them came together and said, look, we can't do in-person services. And we have this whole process when somebody first walks in the door, in classes and workshops and on. Let's throw all that out and let's redo it, and let's redo it in 48 hours. And they did. So as of now, I don't have the numbers as of today, but as of Friday, we had meaningful two-way interactions, programmatic conversations with 2,500 of our clients in that 8-week period of time. We have about 150 jobs that have come out of that, which is terrific. But what we've shifted to from a client services standpoint is just meeting clients where they're at. Where they're at right now is bad. I've been doing this work now for 13 years, and the stories I'm hearing from my staff is very, very scary. Like, I haven't eaten in 3 days. Can you help me? Those are the kind of conversations that our clients are hearing. Fortunately, we've got a variety of different resources that we can apply. We started, like a lot of organizations, a COVID-19 relief fund, and support from our community was really strong. And so we've been able to do gift cards for groceries and a variety of other immediate need supports that we had always done, but we've just had to ramp it up in a really big way because while many of our clients want to go to work, they are either at a high-risk category themselves because of pre-existing medical conditions or because of their age. They may be caring for a family member that is in one of those categories, so they don't want to go out public and work. They could be in a halfway house that is locked down, and so they are restricted from going out. So there's a lot of folks that would like to be working right now, but they just can't because they're worried about their own health and safety, or the health and safety of their family or those that they live with. So that part of the business has had to flip, and my team has done an exceptional job of continuing to sort that community, and the feedback we're getting from clients is very, very just, it acknowledges that human touch that we're able to do, and that's great. It takes a big toll on my staff. We're very concerned about the wellness of our staff. You know, I live in a very comfortable home. I've got a space where I can do what I'm doing right now. A lot of our staff are young, and a starting case manager for us makes $45,000 a year. It's not a lot in LA. So they're living with roommates and trying to figure out the roommate situation. Where can I have these difficult conversations with clients, technology issues, on and on and on. It's a lot for them. And here in week 8, everybody's been great about it, but I can tell it's wearing on people, and they're itching to get back to some other definition of normalcy. And I think that's something all of us in our communities are trying to figure out, is what is that new normal, and how are we going to do it? On the business side, the social enterprise side, has been interesting. It's been basically 2 different stories. We have these three customers, or 3 businesses. The Caltrans one, we were able to negotiate a deal with the state of California, because we're not the only one that does this particular scope of work in the state. There are 3 or 4 other large contractors. We negotiated a deal with the state of California for them to continue to pay the men and women on those crews to work from home. Well, you're thinking, well, what can somebody do working from home that normally is doing landscaping or litter pickup? So we, in the span of about 10 days, developed a whole online curriculum about hazmat and other things that are important for somebody that wants to get a permanent job at Caltrans. We've developed an online curriculum for that. And so as long as the program participants are going through that online curriculum and taking daily quizzes, they still get a paycheck through us, but funded through Caltrans. So that was a great deal that we struck with the state. Our Chrysalis Works program, this is the one that works with business improvement districts. That business has shrunk by 30 to 35%, mainly because there just isn't as much foot traffic in central business districts. And so the business districts have cut back on their deployments. But the good news part of this story is that our staffing business has just had a huge surge in demand, and a lot of it is being driven by Project Roomkey. This is the emergency shelter program that is being stood up throughout the state of California, but particularly here in LA with motels throughout the city and county. So as of right now, I think we have 110 of our clients that are working in Project Roomkey sites, doing janitorial, maintenance, and other services. And we have requests for, I think, another 30 or 40. So our staffing business has kind of picked up the slack for our downturn in other parts of our businesses. And that's not a revenue issue, although I'll take the revenue. It's really an issue of people. We're able to put people that are ready, willing, and able to go to work that we may have downsized from one of the businesses and put them into the staffing business. But all of this is being done remotely and on the fly, and it's pretty amazing to watch. I'm really proud of my team.
So having it being done remotely, you touched on this when you talked about some of your younger staffers, your entry level case managers living with roommates and tech issues. Have you encountered tech issues on the client side of things?
Definitely.
We're all sitting at home with high-speed internet and computers and iPads and everything else, and that is something that most of us take for granted on our iPhones and whatever. That I'm guessing many of the client population you serve, smartphones, yes, potentially, but not the rest. Yeah,
the main touch point that they have with the outside world is through smartphones. And so here's a perfect example. A lot of our case managers are working with clients to file unemployment claims. So imagine that 2,554 number of clients that we placed in jobs last year. Guess what? Many of them are now out of work. And so they're reaching back out to their case manager. And one of the conversations is, well, you can file for unemployment benefits and they're enhanced. And that's great. It's a 12-page application on the EDD website. So if you're sitting in front of a nice big fat screen like I am right now, okay, it's not that big a deal. But if you're trying to do it on a phone, it's next to impossible. So my staff is literally listening to the client on the phone and then punching in on the EDD's website on behalf of the client to apply for unemployment benefits. The same goes for applying for a job. Every job application, even before this crisis, basically was an online job application. And we have across all of our centers nearly 100 client computers that are available for them to use in our centers, but they can't use them right now. And they can't go to a library to use a computer right now. So even if they want to apply for a job, how do they do it? Either you do it through your smartphone, or again, you use our case managers as interpreters, basically. We do it that way. But even the smartphone things, many of our clients use TrackPhone or some of these pay per minute or pay per gigabyte plans. They use them up. They don't have the money to recharge them. So we're paying for that as well. We're able to offer them resources to be able to get the additional data and minutes on their phones as needed.
Yeah, I just think about it how, with so many things that these sort of crises tend to highlight and expose the gap between, those of us who are able to access not social services, but technology services and communication services, right? That, if you have a phone and you're paying per gigabyte, you're not putting the Zoom app on it to be able to chat with a caseworker, on a video call, because it just doesn't pencil out.
I think it's really an interesting time for us in so many ways across society. But this whole notion of essential workers that's been talked about a lot, I think we're all thinking about this differently. I certainly think differently about the women and men that I see at my local Ralph's and the risk that they are taking every day going to work. I never would have thought about that. It's like, whatever, it's a job. They get paid a decent wage, particularly the ones that are unionized, and that's great. Good for them. Well, now they're one of the few that are working, as well as healthcare workers, as well as the folks that run the sewage plant and pick up our trash and all the rest of it. So it's this segment of our population that we often don't give credit for. And no offense to the nurses and the doctors, and it's great. The first responders, they should get the attention. But I hope that we don't forget about all those that are doing work that many of us don't want to do. And we see this as the reopening begins, right? Who is it that is actually going back to work? We aren't. We're going to continue to work from our homes. Most likely, I will. That's part of our reopening plan, is if you're not essential and if you don't have to be in the office, you should continue to work from home. But many of my lower paid staff are going to have to come back to the office. And we're going to see that throughout our communities. So I hope that this generates a thoughtful dialogue about wages, about income stability and income stratification in our society, because this just spotlights it from my perspective.
Yeah, so true. Has the crisis at all, exposed new areas of service for you to provide to clients, or new areas of need?
I think as my team and I think about what will our community need to recover from this, I think back to what did our country do in the days of the Depression. The Works Progress Administration was the creation at that time. And in fact, immediately after this meeting, I'm on a call with Senator Booker and Baldwin's offices, and we're talking about exactly that. They're both sponsoring some legislation that would create a version of a subsidized or transitional jobs program. I think we will be uniquely positioned to be able to offer those kinds of services on a large scale to the community, because we're going to be living with 20 to 30% unemployment for the foreseeable future. That's just the way it's going to be. And the government is going to have to figure out creative ways to keep people not only engaged in their community, but whole financially. And we got lots of stuff that needs to get done in our communities: infrastructure, construction. We all have our list of stuff that needs to get done. So I think when it comes to opportunities, I think we need to get creative about how we use resources that we've got in the community and what the needs of the communities are that we just never seem to be able to get to on our list because we don't have the money or we don't have the people to do it. Well, now we have the people to do it. The question is if we can find the money to do it. organization like ours, and not just Chrysalis, there's others that can, I think, help coordinate some of this work. There could be some positives that come out of this. I'm hopeful for that anyway.
Well, I'm thinking about, you saying that we're going to have to get comfortable living with 20 to 30% unemployment for the foreseeable future, or certainly for a while, which kind of makes me think, have you yet seen, or I'm guessing you certainly anticipate seeing, a change in the profile of the typical client that walks in the door? Do you imagine serving people who, 10 weeks ago, forget having heard of Chrysalis, never would have imagined walking in the front door? Are you seeing that yet? Do you anticipate likely seeing that down the road?
It hasn't happened yet, but we do anticipate it'll happen. This happened in the 2008, 2009 downturn, particularly on our West Side office in Santa Monica, where, there's just all kinds of anecdotal stories I could tell you about folks that were attorneys or business people or what have you, and they got caught up in it, and they turned to us for services. So we haven't seen it yet, but I expect once we do reopen physically our offices, we're going to have some new folks that are going to come in that may not fit the profile of our traditional demographic.
I want to go back to something you said, early on, which was that, when you guys first went remote, your team said, basically, we're going to throw out the entire model and reinvent it in 2 days. So you've basically moved completely away from the model that has, served well for decades. Do you anticipate going back to it when this is over? Some hybrid, this is a conversation I think that a lot of us are having in terms of what are the lessons that we learn from the skills that we've developed as we respond to this, and what pieces of that do we want to hold on to? What pieces of the way things were do we want to readopt?
Yeah, we are given a lot of space to thinking about exactly this question. We're in year 3 of a 5-year strategic plan, and our plan had been this year to begin work on the next strategic plan. Well, we've thrown that idea out, because how can you do a strategic plan when you don't know what tomorrow looks like? But what it is inspiring us to do, and what we're going to spend, my leadership team is going to spend the summer on, is challenging what we call our theory of change, which is why we're pretty clear on why we exist. But if a job is the key to self-sufficiency, which has been the end result of where we are, the way that we go about getting there traditionally needs to be called into question. The tools that we use, the processes that we use, how much of it has to be done in a Chrysalis facility, how much of it is one-on-one versus group activities, all of those things need to be challenged. And it's actually one of the, again, trying to find the positive side here, it's one of the good things about a crisis is it does force you to think really, really hard and challenge your assumptions. And we certainly are being challenged every day about all of our assumptions. So for example, we typically have a set of 4 classes that all of our clients go through before they get to a case manager. We're not going to be able to do classes in the traditional sense when we reopen. We're not doing it now, and we certainly won't be able to do that in June or whenever it is that we are allowed to go back to our offices. So what is that going to look like? And how do we deliver that content in a different way? How do we use technology to deliver that content in a different way? There's a lot of really interesting questions that I think are going to be good for us to think through. And it actually does help us think about the bigger picture of where we want to go long term, because we had been on this growth spurt. We had added these 2 additional offices, the one in Anaheim and the one in South LA. Anaheim, for example, costs us $1 million a year to run that office with staffing and all the other costs. It's very, very expensive, but it's been great. It's been a home run for us. It's been super busy. But we can't do $10 million offices rapidly. That's just not financially sustainable. Well, now we've figured out we can actually deliver great services remotely using a variety of different technologies. Could we do that to Yuba City? Could we do that to Fresno? Could we do that to other communities, perhaps in partnership with somebody on the ground, but do pieces of it that we're really, really good at? Could we deliver that remotely? We ought to talk about that. So I think we're going to learn a lot about ourselves as we look a bit reflectively on this. And what will emerge is something that looks quite a bit different from what Chrysalis was just a few months ago. And I think that's a good thing. The downside of that is change and disruption is hard for anybody, but particularly for our frontline staff. It's going to mean that some people will have different jobs. Some positions may not exist anymore. And we were fortunate enough to be awarded a PPP, a paycheck protection loan. I say fortunate. I'm not so sure it's fortunate because it's so complicated and crazy and controversial at the moment. But that buys us time. That buys us time to survive. But next year, we're not going to have that benefit. And yet fundraising has been hit. Our big gala has been canceled and on and on and on. So we were going to be faced with some very difficult restructuring decisions anyway. Now we're also faced with redesigning a program. Trying to do all of that at once in a crisis is, well, that's why, Rabbi, I said I would probably be here a little bit longer because we got a lot to figure out, but I get fired up about it. I think we really have an opportunity to think differently about the way we do business. And there's an advantage to having somebody like me that's got a few gray hairs. I've been through this enough that I have a sense of what we need to do. And fortunately, I've got a lot of trust with the board and with staff. So if I wasn't here doing it, if a new leader would come in right now, it would be very difficult for her to do it.
Well, you're absolutely the right man for the job at the right time from my perspective. And I know they're lucky to have you.
Well, I'm just a little bit worried about the hair though. I mean, if this keeps going in this direction, yeah.
I braved the clippers the other day, which was not pretty, but I couldn't deal with it anymore.
I may be right there after you.
Too much, absolutely. One last question just about Pacoima. What is it about Pacoima from a geographic standpoint or a demographic standpoint that kind of makes it, and maybe I'm overstating this, kind of like, the social service epicenter of the valley, or maybe it's a gross overstatement to say the Skid Row of the valley, but I just think about Mend being there and, kind of it being, in my estimation, kind of the pocket where this work happens. What is it about that kind of corner of the valley?
It's really interesting. I don't know historically why Pacoima has been such an underserved community and had so many challenges economically. It's primarily a Latino community, and there is a high percentage of immigrants, some of whom are undocumented, and so there's that issue in the mix. I think they were particularly hit by the economic transformation of the valley in the 70s, when the major manufacturers left town, the GM plant closed and the aircraft manufacturers left. There was a high wage base there that evaporated. And what has replaced that are warehouses and other large retail and lower paying things. So I'm sure that that factors into the mix. But it's really interesting. You walk around our offices on Van Nuys Boulevard across the street from the regional city hall, and I sometimes walk around the neighborhood there. They're beautiful homes on huge lots. I mean, they're like half-acre lots. And it just it makes me think that will be the next neighborhood that's going to be found by real estate speculators, and then we're going to have a gentrification problem. It's probably just a matter of time. But you're right, Mend is there. YPI, before they had their fortunate problems a couple of years ago, had a major focus in Pacoima. It just hasn't quite gotten the traction yet. I'm not sure why.
So interesting. So what are the biggest challenges that you guys are facing, right now?
I think in addition to the obvious financial ones, which everybody's suffering from, I think the biggest challenge is making sure that my staff is holding it together during this time, making sure that we're supporting them with, and having really transparent conversations around things like boundaries. So what is a work day now? If you're working from home, for those of us that are, in senior level positions, we're used to being on 24/7, and that's just the way it is. But a case manager who is a non-exempt hourly employee, right? So their computer could be on all the time. Their clients are calling them on their cell phone. And how do we establish boundaries so we make sure they know it's okay your hours are 8 to 5 or whatever they are, and it's okay to turn your phone off. They don't want to do that because they want to be there for their clients. So helping support them through that and making sure that when we do begin to reopen, helping people bridge that gap from the way it used to look to the way it is going to look, which is we're not all going to be in the office. Even if your job is in the office, we all can't be there at the same time. All of that change, it's just so much change going on at the same time. The other factor that I'm worried about with my staff is survivor's guilt. So this shows up in a few different ways. One, about the client experience versus our staff members. So our staff member has got a job, they've got a home, even if it's not a great situation, they're housed. And they're talking to clients all day long that are in bad spots. So there's that guilt there. There's also the guilt on, I've had roommates, and of my 3 roommates, 2 of them work in the hospitality business and they've been out of work for 6 weeks. And so what are we going to do about that? Who's paying the rent? And they're off at the beach or reading books, but I have a job and I have income. So there's that issue as well. I think the challenges that I think about in the short term have a lot to do with how we keep our staff together and how we support them, because we know we're going to get hit with a waterfall of new clients. We're already seeing it. We are intaking new clients today, but I know that's going to really accelerate when it's known that our offices are back open. We got to make sure that we're supporting our team to be able to deal with that.
Well, this has been fascinating, Mark. I'm sure some of our folks joining us today have maybe have questions that they've been sitting on. So I want to open it up either with a hand raise, a virtual hand raise, a real hand raise. You can put a question in the chat, whatever is most comfortable. Lori, I'll unmute you.
Hi, I'm just questioning, and this is a really basic question. How did your clients find you before, and how will this change now?
So before all this happened, about 60% of our clients found us through word of mouth. So it's somebody that they live with in their housing situation. Could be a cousin, could be somebody that they meet one of our street sweepers and ask where they got their job, but basically word of mouth referrals. And then the other 40% is through referral relationships. Today, what we're seeing is, the data is too anecdotal yet because the numbers aren't big enough. But my sense of it is we're getting a lot of referrals from partner agencies right now that know that we are now taking new clients. We started that about 2.5 weeks ago. So we did kind of a soft launch on that to reopen virtually for new clients. And so that's primarily come from referral relationships with housing agencies. And I would expect that will continue for the foreseeable future.
Anybody else? Laurel, I'll unmute you.
I mean, I grew up in LA and we lived in the Valley before we moved to Arizona. I've heard of Pacoima, but where exactly is it?
That's my point.
Yeah, who knows where Pacoima is? I didn't know where it was.
I looked on a map and can't figure out where it is.
Yeah, it's in the northeast corner of the valley. So think of Van Nuys, think of the 405 and the 118, and it's in this corner off the 405 and the 118 to the east.
Yeah.
All right, so
the 405 south 118.
The large houses that you talked about and what used to be there now makes sense to me. So
yeah, there's actual space out in that part of the valley.
Okay.
It's way too hot for me though. Every time I go out there in the summer, I can't deal
come
with
to Phoenix.
Oh, that's true.
Thank you.
Sure.
Gary.
I was just raising my hand to say I know what Pacoima was. Sorry.
Go off.
You get a gold star for knowing where your LA geography.
All right, anybody else? Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Mark, thank you for being so generous with your time. I know how busy you are doing this amazing work. I will make a quick plug just because you mentioned it earlier in clients coming in being food insecure. Mm-hmm. we're doing, close to 1,000 grocery bags a week.
Oh, wow.
So feel free to send anybody our way that needs it.
And that's out of the center?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I will make sure my staff.
It's by appointment for social distancing reasons. We're not obviously lining up hundreds of clients. Yeah, Wednesdays and Sundays. Diapers also. We're doing literally tens of thousands of diapers a week. So.
Great. Good to know. I'll make sure my team's aware of that.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, again, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Pleasure.
Stay safe out there and see you all next week.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.